My parents told their friends, "We only have one child," while I was in the room, so I inherited Grandma's $10 million estate they thought was theirs. Your support keeps this story alive. Please subscribe, and while you're here, tell us where you're watching from. It always warms my heart. I was refilling the water pitcher when I heard my mother's laugh, the fake one she reserved for company. "Oh, Frank is our pride and joy. Our only child, really." The crystal glasses clinked as Dad nodded in agreement. I stood frozen in the kitchen doorway, water sloshing over my hands. Their friends, the Hendersons, smiled politely while I existed 10 feet away in the same room, invisible. 23 years old, and I'd just been erased. Not metaphorically. Literally. With witnesses. "Jasmine works so hard," Mrs. Henderson said, gesturing toward me. My mother's face tightened like a fist. "Oh, we're hosting Jasmine temporarily. Family friend." The words hit like a slap. Frank, my golden boy brother, sat there smirking into his wine glass. He just dropped out of his 3rd graduate program, but sure, he was the only child worth claiming. I should have walked away. Should have laughed it off like I had 1,000 times before. But something in my chest cracked. This wasn't about forgotten birthdays or missed recitals anymore. This was denial of my entire existence. I set down the pitcher carefully, hands shaking. The condensation left wet rings on their mahogany table, the one I'd been told never to touch as a kid because it was too valuable. "Actually," I heard myself say, my voice cutting through their laughter, "I need to tell you something." For faces turned toward me. Mom's eyes flashed warning. But I was done with warnings. I was done with silence. What they didn't know, what nobody knew yet, would change everything. Growing up, Frank could do no wrong. When he crashed Dad's Mercedes at 17, they bought him a BMW. "Boys will be boys," Mom had sighed, writing another check. Meanwhile, I'd worked 2 jobs to pay for community college because education is wasted on girls who'll just get married anyway. That's what Dad said when I asked about tuition. Not suggested. Stated as fact at the dinner table while cutting his steak. Frank was the miracle baby, born after Mom's difficult pregnancy. I came 3 years later. Unexpected, unwanted, though they never said it outright. They didn't have to. It was in every overlooked achievement, every "we're too busy" when I had events. My high school graduation. Dad had a golf tournament. When I made Dean's List. "That's nice, honey. Frank needs help moving into his new apartment." The favoritism wasn't subtle. Frank got the bigger bedroom, the newer car, the college fund that mysteriously evaporated when my turn came. He got family vacations while I got, "maybe next time," and babysitting duties for cousins. He got their time, attention, pride. I got their leftovers and lectures about gratitude. "We put a roof over your head," Mom would say when I dared complain, as if basic shelter was generosity beyond measure. But Grandma saw everything. Grandma Pearl, my father's mother, had sharp eyes that missed nothing. She'd pull me aside at family gatherings, slip money into my pocket, whisper, "You're worth more than they'll ever see, baby girl." I thought she meant emotionally. Turned out she meant literally too. Last month she'd passed away at 89. The funeral was 3 weeks ago. The reading of the will was tomorrow. What could you possibly have to say? Mom's voice dripped with disdain. The Hendersons shifted uncomfortably, suddenly fascinated by their dessert plates. Frank leaned back, confident in his untouchable status. He had no idea what was coming. Neither did they. I'd only found out this afternoon when Grandma's lawyer, Mr. Lawson, called. His words still echoed. "Miss Morrison, you need to come to my office. There's been a significant development regarding your grandmother's estate." I'd gone immediately, my stomach churning with anxiety. Mr. Lawson's office smelled like old books and lemon polish. He'd offered me tea I couldn't drink, then slid papers across his desk. Your grandmother amended her will 6 months before her passing. She was very specific about her intentions. The numbers on the page blurred. $10 million. Properties in Atlanta, Charleston, and Savannah. Stock portfolios. The vacation house on Hilton Head Island. All of it. To me. Only me. There must be a mistake, I'd whispered. Mr. Lawson had smiled sadly. No mistake. She met with me monthly, ensuring everything was ironclad. She specifically mentioned concerns about your parents' treatment of you. She documented instances, dates, examples. This wasn't impulsive, Miss Morrison. This was protective. He'd pulled out a sealed envelope. She left you this letter. And she left specific instructions for tomorrow's reading. Your parents believe they're inheriting everything jointly with you and Frank. Now, standing in their dining room, I felt powerful for the first time in my life. The will reading is tomorrow at 10 a.m., I said calmly. Mr. Lawson's office downtown. I'll see you there. Mom's face flushed red. We know that, Jasmine. Don't be dramatic. But I saw it. The flicker of confusion in Dad's eyes, the slight tension in Frank's jaw. They sensed something had shifted but couldn't identify what. That made it even sweeter. I waited until I got back to my cramped studio apartment, the one I could barely afford on my medical assistant salary, before opening Grandma's letter. My hands trembled as I broke the seal. Her handwriting, still elegant despite arthritis, filled 3 pages. My dearest Jasmine, it began. If you're reading this, I'm gone and you're about to discover the truth about my estate. I need you to understand why. She wrote about watching me grow up invisible. How she'd begged my parents to treat us equally, threatened to cut them off if they didn't change. They'd promised her they would, then continued the same patterns behind her back. So she'd started testing them. She'd tell them about my achievements, gauge their reactions. She'd invite me to lunches and record their dismissive responses when I mentioned plans with her. She'd kept a journal documenting years of their neglect. 3 years ago, I told your father I was updating my will, Grandma wrote. He assumed he and Frank would inherit everything. He actually said, "Don't worry about Jasmine, Mom. She'll be fine. She's used to less." Used to less. As if my own granddaughter deserved poverty because he'd conditioned her to expect nothing. That's when I knew what I had to do. Not out of spite, baby girl, but out of love. You deserved someone fighting for you. The final paragraph broke me. I've left you everything because you're the only one who never asked for anything. You loved me without expectation. You visited without obligation. You cared without condition. That's worth more than they'll ever understand. Use this money to build the life they tried to deny you. And don't you dare feel guilty. Love, your Grandma Pearl. I sobbed into my pillow, grief and gratitude tangled together, until my neighbor knocked on the wall. Even in mourning, I had to be quiet, small, unobtrusive. I barely slept. By 6 a.m. I was pacing my apartment, rehearsing reactions. Would they scream? Cry? Contest it? Mr. Lawson had assured me the will was bulletproof. Witnesses, notarization, multiple copies with different attorneys, even a video of Grandma explaining her reasoning. She'd prepared for war. At 8, my phone exploded. 17 missed calls. Text after text from Mom. Where are you? We need to discuss how to handle the inheritance together as a family. The audacity was stunning. Family. Now I was family when money was involved. I texted back, "See you at 10. Nothing else. Let them stew." I dressed carefully. The navy blazer Grandma had bought me for job interviews. The pearl earrings she'd given me for my 21st birthday. Armor made of love. In the mirror I looked like someone who mattered. Because I did. I always had, even when they couldn't see it. The drive downtown took 30 minutes. I arrived early, sat in my car and watched them pull up in Dad's Lexus, the one they'd just bought Frank last month for his birthday. They looked relaxed, confident. Mom was already on her phone, probably texting friends about the inheritance we're about to receive. Frank wore sunglasses indoors like the entitled peacock he was. They had no idea they were walking into an ambush. Mr. Lawson greeted me first. "Ready?" he asked quietly. I nodded, though my heart hammered against my ribs. My family filed into the conference room, barely acknowledging me. Mom sat at the head of the table like she owned the place. Frank checked his phone. Dad drummed his fingers impatiently. "Let's get this started," he announced, as if Mr. Lawson worked for him. The lawyer's expression remained neutral, professional. "Of course. Let's begin with the primary beneficiary." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Pearl Morrison's last will and testament, dated January 15th of this year. Mr. Lawson's voice was steady, measured. Mom leaned forward eagerly. Dad's fingers stopped drumming. Frank finally looked up from his phone. After careful consideration and documentation of family dynamics spanning multiple years, Pearl Morrison has designated her entire estate, valued at approximately $10 million, to her granddaughter, Jasmine Claire Morrison. The bequest includes all properties, financial accounts, investments, and personal effects. No provisions have been made for her son, Robert Morrison, or grandson, Frank Morrison. The silence lasted exactly 3 seconds. Then chaos. "What?" Dad's roar shook the windows. Mom's face went from red to purple. "That's impossible. She promised. She promised Frank would." Frank was on his feet, fists clenched. "This is bullshit." Grandma was senile. She didn't know what Mr. Lawson raised his hand. Mrs. Morrison underwent extensive cognitive testing before finalizing this will. 3 separate doctors confirmed her complete mental competency. "I have their reports here." Mom turned on me like a cobra. "You manipulated her. You poisoned her against us. You gold-digging little—" "Careful," Mr. Lawson interrupted coldly. "Slander has consequences." Miss Morrison had no knowledge of the will's contents until yesterday. Pearl specifically ensured that. He pulled out a tablet. "Your mother also recorded a video explanation. Would you like to see it?" I hadn't known about this. None of us had. He pressed play. Grandma appeared on screen, sitting in her favorite chair, the one by the window overlooking her garden. She looked directly at the camera, her voice strong despite her age. "Robert, Sharon, Frank, if you're watching this, you're angry. Good. You should be. Not at Jasmine, but at yourselves. For 23 years I watched you erase that girl from your family. I watched you celebrate Frank's mediocrity while ignoring Jasmine's excellence. I watched you deny her existence to maintain your illusion of the perfect nuclear family you wanted." Her eyes, my eyes, blazed with righteous fury. "Well, here's your consequence." The video continued. Grandma shifted in her chair, her expression hardening. "Sharon, do you remember Jasmine's 16th birthday? You canceled her party, the one you'd promised her for months, because Frank wanted money for that ski trip with his friends. You told her birthdays weren't important at her age. She cried in my kitchen for 2 hours. I took her to dinner, just us, and you called it playing favorites. The irony would be hilarious if it wasn't tragic." Dad's face had gone gray. Mom was crying, but whether from shame or rage I couldn't tell. Grandma wasn't done. "Robert, your daughter made Dean's List 4 consecutive semesters while working full-time to pay her way through school. You know what you said when I brought it up? That's what she should be doing. Nobody's giving out trophies for doing the minimum." "The minimum?" Frank failed out of 2 universities on your dime, and you called him exploring his options. Frank stood up. I don't have to listen to this. Sit down, Mr. Lawson said sharply. The video is part of the legal proceedings. Your grandmother required you to watch it entirely. Frank sat, jaw clenched so tight I thought his teeth might crack. Grandma leaned forward on screen, her voice softening but losing none of its edge. I loved you all. That's what makes this so painful. But I loved Jasmine more because she loved me without expecting anything in return. She visited every Sunday not because she wanted something, but because she wanted me. I spent a year documenting your treatment of her. The missed graduations. The forgotten achievements. The casual cruelty of treating her like a servant in her own home. The dinner party 2 months ago where you introduced Frank to my friends as your pride and joy, while Jasmine served drinks like hired help. I was there, Robert. I heard everything. That was my breaking point. Her face softened. Jasmine, baby, you're watching this too. Don't you dare feel guilty. This money is yours. Build the life they tried to deny you. The video ended. The silence was deafening. Then Mom lunged at me across the table. You bitch. You turned her against us. You, Mr. Lawson was already between us, 2 security guards appearing at the door. Mrs. Morrison, you need to leave. No. Or I'll have you removed forcibly and file a restraining order on Miss Morrison's behalf. Dad grabbed Mom's arm, pulling her back. His face was a mask of rage and disbelief. This isn't over, he hissed at me. We'll contest this. We'll take you to court. Mr. Lawson smiled thinly. Please do. Your mother anticipated that. She set aside $2 million specifically for legal defense. She also documented conversations where you discussed managing her assets while she was alive, essentially planning her financial future without her consent. Those recordings are admissible in court. I'd reconsider litigation if I were you. The fight drained out of Dad's face. He'd been caught and he knew it. Frank was the last to speak, his voice shaking with impotent fury. You think you're better than us? You're nothing. You'll always be nothing. I'm $10 million richer than nothing, I said quietly. The words felt foreign in my mouth, powerful and strange. And I'm done being your punching bag. I stood, gathering my purse. Mr. Lawson handed me a folder. All the account information, property deeds and access codes. The funds will transfer to your account within 72 hours. I've also taken the liberty of recommending a financial advisor and a therapist who specializes in family trauma. You'll need both. I walked out of that conference room with my head high, my family's screams echoing behind me. In the elevator, I finally let myself shake. Not from fear, but from the sheer enormity of what had just happened. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. This is Frank. You're dead to us. Don't ever contact us again. I laughed. A slightly hysterical sound that made the other elevator passenger edge away. They'd finally given me what I'd always wanted. Freedom from them. And all it cost them was everything. The calls started immediately. Cousins I hadn't heard from in years suddenly remembered my existence. Hey Jazz. It's been too long. We should grab coffee. Aunts who'd ignored me at family gatherings wanted to check in and catch up. I blocked them all. But Uncle Terrence, Dad's younger brother who'd always been kind, called from a number I didn't recognize. Against my better judgment, I answered. Jasmine, don't hang up. I'm not calling about money. He wasn't. Uncle Terrence had been the black sheep of the family, the one who'd married outside his race and moved to Oregon to run a bookstore. Grandma had loved him fiercely. Dad had barely tolerated him. Your grandmother told me about the will 6 months ago, he admitted. She wanted someone in the family to understand her reasoning. She made me promise not to warn you because she wanted your inheritance to be completely yours. No guilt, no preparation, just pure gift. But she also made me promise to call after the reading. To make sure you were okay. I wasn't okay. I was terrified. Exhilarated. Guilty despite Grandma's words. Rich beyond comprehension and more alone than ever. They hate me, I whispered. Uncle Terence was quiet for a moment. They hate themselves. You're just the mirror showing them what they really are. That's not your burden to carry, sweetheart. Your grandmother knew they'd react this way. Why do you think she left you enough money to never need them again? We talked for an hour. He told me stories about Grandma I'd never heard, how she'd defied her own racist parents to marry Grandpa, a black musician from New Orleans. How she'd fought for integration in her neighborhood in the 60s, marching despite threats. How she taught him that love isn't biological, it's chosen. She chose you, he said simply. Not because you deserved it more, but because they appreciated it less. Honor that choice by living well. That's the best revenge and the best tribute. After we hung up, I opened my laptop and searched for Grandma's house on Hilton Head, the place where I'd spent the best summers of my childhood, before Frank got old enough to complain about boring beach houses, and they stopped taking me along. It was mine now. All mine. I booked a flight for tomorrow. I needed to see it, to stand in her space and figure out who I was going to become now that I was finally free. The house smelled like her. Lavender sachets and lemon oil, vanilla candles and old books. I stood in the foyer, suitcase abandoned by the door, and sobbed. Every room held memories. The kitchen where she taught me to make her famous peach cobbler, laughing when I burned the first 3 attempts. The sunroom where we'd read together on rainy afternoons, her in her chair, me curled up on the window seat. The porch where she told me about my grandfather, their love story, the life they'd built despite everyone telling them it wouldn't work. I found more letters. She'd hidden them throughout the house, tucked into books, taped under drawers, slipped behind picture frames. Each one a time capsule of love and wisdom. You were 7, one read, when your mother forgot to pick you up from school. You waited for 2 hours before calling me. You apologized for bothering me. That's when I knew something was deeply wrong. Children shouldn't apologize for needing their parents. Another, dated 3 years ago. Your father asked me to lend him money for Frank's business venture. The 3rd one that year. I asked about your student loans. He said, Jasmine understands family sacrifices. I said, does Frank? He hung up on me. I changed my will the next day. The pattern was clear, documented, undeniable. This wasn't favoritism on Grandma's part. This was equity. This was correction. This was love manifested in the most practical way possible, giving me the resources to escape. I spent 3 days in that house, walking the beach, sitting in her chair, reading her journals. She'd been meticulous. Every slight, every forgotten birthday, every dismissive comment, documented with dates and context. Not obsessively but carefully, like someone building a case. Because that's exactly what she'd been doing. Building an ironclad case for why her only son and eldest grandson deserved nothing. The evidence was overwhelming. I'd lived it, but seeing it written in her careful handwriting made it real in a way I'd never allowed myself to acknowledge. On the 3rd night, sitting on the porch watching the sunset paint the ocean gold, I made a decision. I would honor her not by using this money to prove something to my family, but by building something they could never touch. Something mine. Something that would have made her proud. I pulled out my phone and called Mr. Lawson. I want to start a foundation. For kids whose families don't see them. Can you help me with that? The Pearl Morrison Foundation for Overlooked Youth. Mr. Lawson loved it immediately. We spent weeks setting up the infrastructure. scholarships for first-generation college students whose families didn't support their education, grants for young people pursuing careers their parents deemed unrealistic, housing assistance for those who needed to escape toxic homes. I poured $3 million into it upfront, established a board, hired staff who understood the mission because they'd lived it. The news spread fast. Local media picked it up. Young heiress honors grandmother with charitable foundation. The story was too good, too perfectly ironic for them to resist. Morrison, who inherited her grandmother's entire estate in a surprising will reading last month, has dedicated a significant portion to helping young people whose achievements are overlooked by their families. They didn't mention my family's fury, but everyone could read between the lines. This was money my parents thought would be theirs now going to strangers. Dad called from Mom's phone. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. You're really doing this? His voice was hollow, defeated. You're giving away our inheritance to random kids? It was never your inheritance, I said calmly. And they're not random. They're exactly who Grandma would have wanted to help. Kids like I was. Kids like you made me. Silence. Then quietly, we didn't make you anything. You were always difficult, always ungrateful. I hung up. Some conversations weren't worth having. Frank tried a different approach. He showed up at the foundation's office unannounced, contrite and desperate. Jess, I'm sorry. I was a jerk. I took advantage of Mom and Dad's favoritism, and that wasn't fair to you. Can we start over? He looked sincere, puppy dog eyes, slumped shoulders, the whole performance. I'd watched him deploy this act on teachers, girlfriends, and professors for years. It usually worked. No, I said simply. His mask slipped. No. After everything I just said, you're not sorry. You're broke. There's a difference. Please leave. Security escorted him out while he screamed threats about lawyers and justice. The foundation launched 3 months after Grandma's death. We funded 40 scholarships the first year. 40 kids who'd been told they weren't worth investing in, now getting the chance I'd had to fight for alone. At the launch event, I gave a speech. My grandmother taught me that family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up, who sees you, who fights for you. This foundation is for everyone still waiting for someone to show up. The applause was thunderous. In the back row, Uncle Terrence wiped his eyes and gave me a thumbs up. 6 months after the will reading, Mom ambushed me at the grocery store. I was comparing avocados when I heard her voice behind me. Living well off blood money, I see. I turned slowly, shopping basket in hand. She looked terrible. Older, thinner, her hair graying at the temples. Dad had apparently been demoted at work after word spread about the will situation. Frank was living in their basement, unemployed. The whole family had imploded without Grandma's money to cushion their dysfunction. It's not blood money, I said evenly. It's inheritance. There's a difference. Mom laughed bitterly. You manipulated a sick old woman. You turned her against her own son. What kind of person does that? People were staring now, but I didn't care. This conversation was 23 years overdue. The kind of person you created, Mom. The one who learned that love in our family was conditional. That belonging had to be earned. That I was only worth acknowledging when no one important was watching. That's not, we never, the Hendersons' dinner party. We only have one child. I was standing 10 feet away. Her face crumpled. For a moment I saw something that might have been regret. Then her expression hardened again. You're taking this too far. That foundation, these scholarships, you're making us look like monsters. I'm not making you look like anything. I'm just living my life. The fact that it makes you look bad isn't my problem anymore. She slapped me. Right there in the produce section in front of a dozen witnesses. The crack echoed. My cheeks stung. But I didn't flinch. I didn't raise my hand. I just looked at her, really looked at her, and saw someone who'd never learned that love given freely is stronger than loyalty demanded. You just assaulted me in public, I said quietly. I could press charges. I won't because Grandma wouldn't want that. But this is the last time you touch me. The last time you speak to me. We're done. I walked away, leaving my shopping basket and my mother standing there, her hand still raised like she might strike again. In my car I shook. Not from fear or sadness, but from the sheer power of finally setting a boundary and enforcing it. I called Mr. Lawson. I need a restraining order drawn up. All three of them, Mom, Dad, Frank. Already prepared, he said gently. I was waiting for you to ask. Your grandmother predicted this too. She left instructions. Of course she had. Grandma had thought of everything. 1 year after Grandma's death, I stood on the porch of my Hilton Head house, watching the sunrise paint the water pink and gold. The Pearl Morrison Foundation had grown beyond my wildest dreams. We'd funded 200 scholarships, established partnerships with 3 universities, started a mentorship program connecting our recipients with professionals in their chosen fields. The work was hard and fulfilling in a way nothing else had ever been. I was making a difference. I was mattering. Finally, Uncle Terrence had moved back to South Carolina to help run the foundation. He lived in Grandma's Charleston property, managing the East Coast operations while I handled headquarters in Savannah. We had family dinners every Sunday, sometimes just us, sometimes with the foundation staff, sometimes with scholarship recipients who'd become like siblings. We'd built our own family, chosen and deliberate, full of people who showed up for each other. No ghosts. No guilt. No games. My parents sent a letter through their lawyer. Not an apology but a request. Could they attend the foundation's annual gala? It would mean a lot to see Pearl's legacy in action. Mr. Lawson called it reputation management. They wanted to be seen supporting the charity, rewriting history so they looked like proud parents instead of bitter ex-beneficiaries. I declined. Some bridges needed to stay burned. They'd had 23 years to see me. They'd chosen not to. That was their loss, not mine. I'd started therapy, unpacking decades of feeling invisible. My therapist said I was grieving, not just Grandma but the family I'd wanted and never had. He was right. But I was also celebrating. Every scholarship awarded was a tiny rebellion against the narrative that some people matter more than others. Every kid who got to pursue their dream because we saw their worth. That was Grandma's legacy and mine, intertwined forever. The sun fully cleared the horizon, turning the whole world gold. I sipped my coffee, made exactly how Grandma had taught me, strong and sweet, and smiled. She'd given me more than money. She'd given me permission to matter, to take up space, to be seen. And now I was passing that gift forward, multiplying it, making sure that every overlooked kid found someone who showed up for them. That was the real inheritance. The 10 million was just the tool. Love was the foundation. And for the first time in my life I had both.